Dad died when I was 14. Heart attack while checking fence lines on the Wyoming ranch he'd worked his entire adult life. One moment he was there, solid and real, teaching me how to read cattle and mend wire. The next, he was gone, and everything I thought I knew about family collapsed with him. Mum remarried within 18 months. Brad moved into our ranch house like he owned it, which legally, after the wedding, he sort of did. He brought his 2 kids from his first marriage, Katie and Mason, both older than me, both treating me like an inconvenience in what should have been their inheritance. I was 15 and grieving, lost in a house that no longer felt like home. The only thing I had left of Dad was his ranch knife, custom-made, hand-forged by a bladesmith in Montana with a handle carved from elk antler and brass fittings worn smooth from decades of use. Dad had carried that knife every single day, used it for everything from cutting hay twine to field dressing deer. On the blade, engraved in careful script, were the words, "To John Hayes, from his father Thomas. A rancher's honor lives in his work." 1985. Dad's own father had given it to him when he took over management of the ranch. It represented legacy, continuity, the passing of responsibility from one generation to the next. Dad had promised me that knife would be mine someday, that when I was old enough to understand its weight, he'd pass it on just as his father had. He died before that day came, but Mom told me the knife was mine by right. I kept it in a wooden box in my room, taking it out sometimes just to hold it, to feel the connection to the man I missed with an ache that never quite faded. When I turned 18, I moved out. Couldn't stand living in that house anymore, watching Brad reshape everything Dad had built, listening to my stepfamily talk about selling the ranch for development money. I got a job at a neighboring ranch, rented a small trailer, and tried to build something of my own. The day I moved, I packed carefully, making sure Dad's knife was secure in my duffel bag. I remember checking 3 times, wrapping it in a flannel shirt Dad used to wear, tucking it deep where it couldn't get damaged. But when I unpacked at the trailer, the knife was gone. I tore through every box, every bag, checked my truck twice, called Mom in a panic. She said she'd look around the house, but days passed with no word. Finally, Katie texted me, "Checked everywhere, not here. You probably lost it in the move. That's what happens when you rush." The implication was clear. This was my fault, my carelessness. I grieved that knife like a second death of my father. For 3 years, I carried the guilt of losing the one thing that mattered most. I worked hard, saved money, tried to build a life despite the hole where my family used to be. I didn't talk to my step-family much. Mom would call occasionally, her voice strained, caught between her new husband and her grieving son. I couldn't blame her for choosing survival, for trying to move forward. But I couldn't forgive the erasure of Dad either, the way Brad had methodically removed every trace of him from the ranch, from our lives. Then, on a Tuesday in late September, I drove into town for supplies. I needed a new farrier's rasp and some fence staples, basic ranch stuff. The hardware store didn't have the rasp in stock, and someone mentioned that old Ed's Pawn and Trade sometimes had tools. Ed's shop was one of those places that had been around forever, crammed full of everything from power tools to vintage saddles. I'd been there a few times over the years, usually just browsing, occasionally finding a useful second-hand item. Ed himself was in his 60s, a former ranch hand who'd opened the shop after a back injury ended his riding days. He knew ranching, knew the people in the county, and ran his business with the kind of old-fashioned integrity that was becoming rare. I pushed through the door, bell chiming overhead, and started scanning the tool section. Ed was helping another customer, some tourist looking at belt buckles. I found a decent rasp and was heading to the counter when something caught my eye in the knife display case. My heart stopped. There, among hunting knives and pocket knives and cheap gas station blades, was Dad's knife. I'd know it anywhere. The elk antler handle, the brass fittings with that specific pattern of wear, the perfectly balanced weight of custom forging. But it was the inscription that removed all doubt. Even through the glass, I could read it. To John Hayes, from his father Thomas, a rancher's honor lives in his work, 1985. My hands started shaking. Ed finished with the tourist and walked over, noticed me staring at the case. "See something you like?" I pointed at Dad's knife, not trusting my voice. Ed's expression changed immediately, shifting from shopkeeper friendly to something more serious. "That one's special," he said quietly. "Just came in last week. Soon as I saw the inscription, I knew it had a story." "It's my father's," I managed to say, voice rough. "John Hayes. That was my dad. He died 6 years ago. This knife was supposed to be mine." Ed studied my face carefully, then pulled keys from his pocket and unlocked the case. He lifted out the knife with obvious reverence, handling it like the valuable artifact it was. "What's your name, son?" "Ethan. Ethan Hayes." He turned the knife over in his weathered hands, examining the inscription again. "John Hayes. I remember him. Good man. Worked the Double H ranch north of town. Died young, if I recall. Heart attack out on the range." I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. Ed set the knife carefully on the counter between us, his eyes never leaving my face. "This knife's got your daddy's name on it, and his daddy's name before that. Mind telling me how it ended up in a pawn shop instead of with his son?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I thought I lost it when I moved out 3 years ago. My stepfamily said they couldn't find it." Ed's jaw tightened. "Who brought it in? Can you tell me that? Normally I wouldn't, privacy and all, but this is different. This is family heritage, not some random item. A young woman brought it in, maybe mid-20s, blonde, driving a new Lexus. Didn't know anything about the knife, said it was just something she found in a storage unit and wanted quick cash. I gave her $100. Katie. It had to be Katie, my stepsister. The Lexus, the age, the casual dismissal of the knife's value. She'd taken it from my room before I moved, probably while I was loading the truck, and held onto it until she needed money. 3 years she'd let me believe I'd lost it, let me carry that guilt, when all along she'd had it. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected, opening wounds I'd thought were scarred over. Rehook. Ed placed the knife in my hands, but his next words stopped me from walking out. "Son, that knife's worth a lot more than $100. And the woman who sold it committed a crime." I looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Ed leaned against the counter, arms crossed, the posture of a man settling in to explain something important. "Family heirlooms, especially engraved items with clear ownership, they can't be legally sold by just anyone. If your stepsister took this from you without permission and pawned it, that's theft. I've been in this business 30 years, and I can smell a wrong sale from a mile away. That woman didn't act like someone selling her own property. She acted like someone dumping stolen goods for quick cash." My mind raced through implications. Katie had stolen from me, had taken the one thing I valued most, and traded it for money. But more than that, she'd lied about it, had looked me in the eye and blamed me for losing it. 3 years of unnecessary guilt, and she'd known the truth the whole time. "What can I do?" I asked. Ed picked up the knife, weighing it thoughtfully. "Legally, I should report this to the sheriff. Pawn shops have strict rules about stolen goods, but here's what I'm thinking. This knife belongs in your hands, not tied up in evidence lockers and legal proceedings. I'm willing to return it to you, no charge, if you can provide proof of ownership and relationship to John Hayes. I have my birth certificate, his death certificate, and about 100 photos of him wearing this knife on his belt." "That'll do. Bring them by tomorrow, and this knife goes home where it belongs." He paused, studying me carefully. "But son, you need to deal with your stepfamily, not for revenge, but for closure. people who steal family legacy, they don't stop at one knife. What else have they taken that you don't even know about? His words haunted me that night. I lay in my small trailer, unable to sleep, thinking about the 3 years since I'd moved out. I'd avoided dealing with the ranch, with Mom, with the whole situation because it hurt too much. But Ed was right. If Katie had stolen the knife, what else had disappeared? Dad's rifle, his pocket watch, the family photos. I called Mom the next morning. She answered on the 4th ring, voice cautious. "Ethan, this is a surprise. I found Dad's knife, Mom, in a pawn shop. Katie sold it." Silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then quietly, "What?" I explained everything. Seeing the knife in Ed's case, Ed recognizing the inscription, Katie's description matching the seller. Mum's breathing grew ragged. She swore she hadn't seen it. "She told me you must have lost it." I believed her. "What else is gone, Mom? What else did they take?" Another long pause, then a sound that might have been a sob. "I don't know. Brad had me pack up most of your dad's things after we married. Said it was unhealthy to live in a shrine. I stored boxes in the barn, but I haven't looked at them in years. I was afraid to look, afraid of the grief. I need to come look through those boxes. I need to know what else they took." "Come today," she said firmly, voice strengthening. "Brad's in Denver on business. The kids are with him. It's just me here. We'll look together." I drove out to the ranch that afternoon, my stomach tight with anxiety. I hadn't been back since I'd moved out. Couldn't bear to see Brad running Dad's land. But Mom met me in the driveway, and despite everything, she was still my mother. We hugged, and she felt smaller than I remembered, more fragile. The barn was exactly as I remembered, still smelling of hay and leather and decades of honest work. Mum led me to a corner where a half-dozen cardboard boxes sat covered in dust. "I packed these 6 years ago," she said, "right after Brad and I married. He said keeping John's things around was preventing me from moving forward. I thought he was trying to help me heal." We opened the boxes together. The first held Dad's work clothes, his everyday jeans and shirt still faintly smelling of him. The second had his collection of ranching books, guides on cattle management and grass rotation. The third should have held his firearms, 2 rifles and a shotgun. It was empty except for the gun cases. "He had a 30-06 and a 308, I said, voice tight, "and Grandpa's old 12-gauge. Mom's face went white. "Brad said he'd moved them to the safe, for security. But we both knew. We went through the remaining boxes, finding more gaps. Dad's pocket watch, gone. His silver belt buckle from winning the county roping competition, gone. A leather photo album of 3 generations of Hayes ranchers, gone. Item after item, pieces of my father's life, carefully stolen and presumably sold. By the time we finished, Mom was shaking with anger. "I trusted them," she whispered. "I let them into John's home, onto his land, and they stole from his memory. They stole from his son." "Why would they do this?" I asked, though I was starting to understand. Mum sat heavily on a hay bale, looking older than her 52 years. "Money. It's always been about money with Brad. He thought marrying me meant marrying the ranch, didn't understand it's held in a trust for you. When he realized he couldn't sell the land, couldn't cash out, he started getting resentful. I should have seen it sooner. She told me things I hadn't known, revelations that reframed my entire understanding of the past 6 years. Brad had gambling debts, serious ones. Katie and Mason had expensive tastes, supported by Dad's stolen belongings, sold piece by piece. Mum had been willfully blind, choosing to believe Brad's explanations rather than face the truth that her second marriage was built on theft. "I'm calling the sheriff," Mum said finally, standing with new resolve. "All of it. The knife, the guns, everything. They're not getting away with this. Mom, are you sure that's your husband?" She looked at me with tears streaming down her weathered face. He stopped being my husband the moment he started stealing from my son. John trusted me to protect his legacy, and I failed, but I can make it right now. Sheriff Martinez arrived within an hour. He'd known Dad, had worked cattle with him during community brandings. When Mom and I explained everything, showed him the empty boxes and the list of missing items, his face grew grim. "I'll need statements from both of you, and we'll need proof of what Katie sold." "Ethan, you said the pawn shop owner has records?" "Ed's Pawn and Trade. He's got the transaction documented, including Katie's ID." Martinez nodded. "I'll head there next. Mrs. Hayes, I have to warn you, this is going to get ugly. Pressing charges against family, it tears things apart." "They already tore us apart," Mum said quietly. "This is just making it official." Over the next week, the investigation unfolded. Ed provided his records, including the security camera footage of Katie pawning the knife. She'd also sold 2 rifles matching the description of Dad's guns to a different pawn shop 2 counties over. The silver belt buckle had gone to an antique dealer. The photo album was found in Mason's apartment, apparently kept as a joke about the old cowboy. The total value of stolen items exceeded $10,000, making it felony theft. Brad, Katie, and Mason were arrested when they returned from Denver. The looks on their faces when Sheriff Martinez read the charges was something I'll never forget. Shock, rage, and underneath it all, the recognition that they'd been caught. The legal process took months. Brad tried to claim marital property rights, but the trust documents were clear. Everything of Dad's went to me, not to Mum's new spouse. Katie claimed she thought the items were unwanted junk, but the security footage showed her carefully selecting valuable pieces. Mason's possession of the photo album, which he'd posted pictures of on social media with mocking captions, destroyed any claim of innocent misunderstanding. In the end, all 3 took plea deals. Brad got 2 years probation and full restitution. Katie and Mason got community service and probation, plus restraining orders keeping them away from me and Mom. The marriage ended in divorce, and Brad signed away any claim to the ranch in exchange for avoiding jail time. Mom and I began the process of recovering what we could. Some items were returned by the pawn shops and dealers once ownership was proven. Others were gone forever, sold to unknown buyers who disappeared into the vastness of private collections. But we got back what mattered most: Dad's knife, one of his rifles, and the photo album. Holding that knife again, feeling its familiar weight in my hand, was like getting a piece of my father back. I stood in the ranch kitchen where he'd taught me to sharpen blades, where we'd planned my future in ranching, and I felt his presence stronger than I had in 6 years. Mom watched me, her own grief and relief mingling on her face. "He'd be proud of you," she said, "for not giving up, for finding the truth." "He'd be proud of you too," I replied, "for having the courage to make it right." We started rebuilding our relationship, Mom and I. The ranch, still held in trust until my 30th birthday, became a weekend project where we worked together to restore what Brad had let decline. We hired a foreman to handle daily operations, but I spent every spare moment there, relearning the land Dad had loved, reconnecting with the legacy I'd almost lost. Ed became an unexpected friend through all of this. He refused any reward for returning the knife, said knowing it was back with family was payment enough, but I made a point of stopping by his shop regularly, and he taught me about knives, about quality and craftsmanship, about how objects carry history in their worn surfaces and careful engravings. One afternoon, about a year after finding the knife, Ed called me into his shop. "Got something I want to show you?" he said, leading me to his workbench in the back room. There, laid out on clean cloth, was a knife in progress, custom forged, elk antler handle, brass fittings, the style unmistakably similar to Dad's. "What's this?" I asked. "A commission, for you. Same bladesmith who made your daddy's knife, old fellow up in Montana who's still working." I contacted him, told him the story, and he agreed to make one more before he retires. This one's for you, Ethan. Your own rancher's knife to carry alongside your daddy's, so when you have a son or daughter, you'll have one to pass on too. I couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the generosity and thoughtfulness of the gesture. Ed smiled, understanding. Every rancher needs a good knife, but more than that, every man needs to know his history matters, that his family's work means something. Your daddy's knife survived because it was made well and meant something. This one will too. The knife was finished a month later. The bladesmith had engraved it with new words. To Ethan Hayes, from his family. A rancher's honor lives in his work. 2023. I wore it on my belt the day I officially took over management of the ranch on my 30th birthday. Mum signed the trust papers, transferring full control to me, and I stood in the same pasture where Dad had died, wearing his knife on one hip and mine on the other. The land stretched out in all directions, grass golden in the autumn sun, cattle grazing peacefully, the mountains rising purple in the distance. Everything Dad had worked for, everything Grandpa Thomas had built, it was mine now to preserve and protect. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the loss, the theft, the betrayal, and ultimately the recovery. That knife in Ed's pawn shop case had been the key to unlocking truth, to reclaiming not just property but identity, legacy, family. Some people might say it was just a knife, just metal and wood and brass, but it was so much more. It was my father's daily companion, his father's gift, my inheritance. It was proof that honor and work and family matter, that some things are worth fighting for, worth recovering no matter how long they've been lost. I still visit Ed's shop regularly. We've become close friends, the kind of friendship that bridges generations and exists outside blood relation. He tells me stories about the old days of ranching in Wyoming, about men like Dad and Grandpa Thomas who built lives through hard work and integrity. I tell him about my plans for the ranch, about sustainable grazing and water conservation, about honoring the past while embracing the future. And every time I leave his shop, I touch the knife on my belt, feeling its weight, remembering the day I found it in his case, and everything that followed. Mum's doing well now. The divorce was painful, but she says she feels lighter than she has in years. No longer carrying the weight of living a lie. She keeps Dad's rifle over the mantel, alongside his photo, and she started going through old family documents, preserving stories and history for future generations. Sometimes, on Sunday afternoons, we sit on the ranch house porch, and she tells me things about Dad I'd been too young to understand before he died. How he'd struggled with the responsibility of the ranch, how he'd worked multiple jobs to keep it running, how he'd dreamed of passing it to me someday. He'd be so proud, she always ends these conversations, not just of the rancher you're becoming, but of the man you are. You didn't let bitterness destroy you. You fought for what mattered and you won. I don't know if I won exactly. I got some things back, but I also lost years to grief and estrangement. I learned painful lessons about trust and family and the ways people can disappoint you. But I also learned about resilience, about the kindness of strangers like Ed, about the strength it takes to pursue truth when lies are easier. That knife, Dad's knife, my knife, it sits on my dresser every night when I take off my belt. I clean it regularly, oil the blade, maintain the leather wrap on the handle. I use it for ranch work, letting it accumulate new stories, new wear patterns that blend with the old. Someday, if I'm blessed with children, I'll pass it to them along with the one Ed commissioned, and I'll tell them the whole story, the loss, the theft, the recovery. I'll teach them that family legacy isn't just about objects, but about the values those objects represent. I'll make sure they understand that honor, real honor, lives not in what you own, but in how you live, in standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, in protecting what matters, no matter the cost.